One of my favorite theologians is a guy by the name of Tex Sample, who taught Christian ethics at St. Paul's School of Theology in Kansas City for the better part of 4 decades. A wonderful, wonderful storyteller. Tex is known throughout the United States and beyond for his commitment to Christ and for his commitment, much like Martin Luther King Jr.'s commitment, to folks who live on the margins of life. Tex tells of participating one day at an urban ministries rally here in California with his good friend Mac Jones, who is the pastor of a large African-American church in Kansas City. Tex and Mac had just finished speaking to this very enthusiastic group of folks who were fighting poverty and homelessness in Los Angeles, and they were on a really tight schedule to get back to LAX and then fly back to Missouri. As they were making a beeline down the sidewalk in order to catch a taxi, Tex Sample noticed what appeared to be a street person making his way directly towards him and Mac. He said the guy was wearing baggy plaid slacks, a silk disco-style shirt that showed evidence of recent nausea. And so Tex Sample said to himself, I'm going to see if Mac practices what he preaches. I want to see how he handles this situation. Brother, said Mac, have you eaten lately? Well, no, sir, I haven't, and if you could just spare a little change. No, brother, said Mac, you need to eat something. You need to eat some food. You come on, you get in our cab, we'll take you down the street to a place where we can get you something to eat. A Sample confesses straight up that he thinks this is a really bad idea. There is no way they're going to make their flight now, and nonetheless, the 3 of them load into a taxi cab, they get their newfound friend a meal, they drop him off at a local shelter and pay for a week's stay, and still they make their flight to Kansas City. Now the upshot to the story comes in this wonderful moment of reflection by Tex. Having thought long and hard about this encounter, he simply says this: I remembered how differently Mac treated the man that I wanted to avoid. The bottom line was this: I saw a wino. Mac saw a brother. I saw a wino. Mac saw a brother. How you see it almost always dictates how you solve it. It's true about life. It's true about relationships. And when it comes to relationships, it's been my experience that most of us see things through the eyes of the North American common porcupine. The North American common porcupine is a member of the rodent family. On average, it has over 30,000 quills attached to his or her body. Each quill can be driven into an enemy. Some quill wounds can fester and even be fatal. It turns out porcupines want to be lovable, but their nature predisposes them to be very guarded. As a general rule, porcupines have 2 methods for handling relationships: withdrawal and attack. They either head for a tree or they stick out their quills. Any of that sound familiar to you? You're an astute crowd. By now you can spot where this sermon is heading. As one of my former preaching guiding lights, John Ortberg, says, whether we admit it or not, the porcupine's dilemma is our dilemma. How do we get close? How do we stay close with people without getting hurt? Every one of us carries our own little arsenal of quills. They have names like rejection, condemnation, resentment, arrogance, selfishness, envy, contempt, and unforgiveness. They burrow under the skin of our enemies. They can wound, they can fester, they can even kill. Like porcupines, we too learn to survive through a combination of withdrawal and attack. We too find ourselves hurting and being hurt by those we long to be closest to. I thought about the porcupine's dilemma as I revisited this week an event from 2 years ago that reminded me of the importance of the words we speak, of the kindnesses that we extend. It underscored how much the way we see it really does matter. 99 weeks ago, I left the intensive care unit at Rex Hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina on a Friday night after a very poignant visit with a guy by the name of Jerry Parker and his family on the eve of his death. Walking to my Jeep, I realized I hadn't eaten all day. Suddenly, as you know, I was starving, so I decided to hit up a sports bar, Rudino's Sports Bar near the hospital, for a hot turkey and cheese sandwich. It's a great sandwich paired with crinkle-cut French fries that have 0 calories in them. I'm wearing one of my favorite blue suits. In fact, it was this one. And I'm walking in to place my order, and this woman who is standing just inside the front door says to me, "Whoa, you look good," which for the record has crept up to the #1 spot on the ways I like to be greeted list. "That's very kind of you to say," I reply, to which she says, "Why are you so dressed up?" "Well, I've been to the hospital." "Why were you there?" "Well, I was visiting one of my church members." "Are you a preacher?" Never, ever knowing what comes next. "Indeed, I am," I said. "Will you pray for me? Life is really hard right now." Pointing to a guy at the bar, she says, "He and I got married recently. We aren't communicating really well. My dad is really sick." "Sure, I'll pray for you right now." "Really? Right here?" "Yeah, really. Right here." There we were in a booth at Rudino's that functioned as an altar of hope in a world that sometimes feels really hopeless. I prayed for reconciliation, for strength, for peace, for her to really feel her worth. As I walked towards my car, I looked back, saw her walk up to her guy at the bar and start talking. He listened intently for a few moments. Then he stood up and embraced her in this big bear hug, beginning, I pray, the delicate dance of the porcupines. I whispered a prayer of thanksgiving, praying that by my speaking the words that matter, she might speak the words that matter. I'm telling you all, just look into people's eyes. They are the windows of the soul. They'll tell you everything you need to know about somebody if you pay attention. Folks like my Rudino's prayer partner cross your path every single day, and you have a chance to change lives by the words you speak, by the kindnesses that you extend. And really, as followers of Christ, as practitioners of Colossians 3, isn't that really why you are on this earth to begin with? Now, I want you to contrast that story with this one from my old ministerial mentor, a guy by the name of Bill Ritter. I have so many favorite Ritter stories, but near the top of the list is this poignant tale he tells about his relationship with his dad. Ritter's father was by all accounts a genius, but he lacked the credentials to prove it. He dropped out of Northwestern High School in Detroit, Michigan, one semester before graduating. He never went back, and Ritter says that one event handicapped his father his entire life. About his dad, Bill says this: "When I went on to college and seminary, I think he felt proud, but I also think he felt envious and embarrassed. The further I went in higher education, the worse it made him feel about himself, and the less he talked about it. Occasionally, he'd find a subject on which I knew little and he knew much, and after correcting my ignorance, he would say, 'Well, I guess you don't know everything. Maybe your old man isn't as dumb as some people think he is.' It hurt to hear him say things like that. It hurt to not hear him say other, more positive things. It hurt even more when he didn't come for my graduation from Yale. He sent my mom, he sent my sister, but he stayed in Detroit." Very early on a Saturday morning, August 1967, the phone rang in my parsonage in Dearborn. It was my mother saying my father had died. When I got there, I started to go through his papers. I started with his wallet, and I struck a strange kind of pay dirt. There, tucked away behind a few dollar bills, I found several worn sheets of copy paper. They were tissue thin, deeply creased because of so much folding and unfolding. I opened them and quickly realized I didn't need to read them because I'd seen them all before. They were copies of my grades from all 4 years at Albion College and all 3 years at Yale. I knew why he'd kept them. I found myself wondering how many times he'd pulled them out and shown them to somebody, speaking of his son, the student, with such pride. I only wish he had been able to tell me. The Porcupine's Dilemma. Your words can bring life to relationships, or they can bring death. They can bring harmony and healing. They can be quills that kill. During the first couple weeks of this new year, we've understandably spent a lot of time on the vertical dimension of our faith, celebrating through Holy Communion what Jesus did for us, surrendering our will to God's will by focusing on one word, asking God last week for help in getting unstuck. But today, on this third Sunday of a new year, I think the Spirit also has something to say to us about the horizontal dimension of our life. It's been my experience that frayed relationships have an uncommon ability to dry us up spiritually. Relationship dysfunction eats away at our strength. It eats away at our energy to such a degree that we become weary. We become weary in our relationship and walk with God. We simply don't have the energy or the desire to expend on prayer or on service to others, which is why we need to pay particular attention to the invitation that is ours in this wonderful lesson in Colossians 3. Very late in the passage, Paul invites us to say yes to a new way of dress, as Kathy told you, to put on in all of our relationships the wardrobe of compassion and kindness and humility and forgiveness and love. And at the outset of the passage, he drops this really important challenge. If you're serious, if you're really serious about new life with Christ, act like it. Pursue the things over which Christ presides. See things from his perspective. So I invite you today to take stock of your earthly relationships from his perspective. Are they pleasing to God? Are there words to say, fences to mend, promises to keep? No matter your dilemma, here is the very good news of the day, my friends. Good relationships can and do happen for porcupines, for us. Porcupines can learn to keep their barbs to themselves in an image that is far too wonderful to be made up. The naturalist David Costello writes this: male and female porcupines stay together several days while communicating. They touch paws. They even walk on their hind feet in the so-called dance of the porcupines. Only God could have thought up two porcupines dancing paw to paw. It turns out there's an answer to that ancient question: how do porcupines get along? They pull in their quills. They learn how to dance. So let me bring this sermon home by asking you to ponder one final question, one final story. Because reconciliation is often our deepest longing. It's never too late to seek it. You might have a relationship that broke decades ago. Maybe it never ever worked right. Maybe you have been at varying levels of battle with someone close to you for as long as you can remember. I want you to think for a moment right now. Lift a silent prayer to God. Ask him to show you that relationship so that you might enter into the dance of the porcupine. The right words out of your mouth, they give life. The wrong words out of your mouth bring death. One paper cut at a time. And you never, ever really know if you'll get another chance to speak the words that really do matter. Which is why I encourage you to heed the words of Paul today and to heed the words of the one and only Regina Brett. For many years, Regina wrote for my hometown newspaper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, before she turned her attention to writing best-selling books. During her Plain Dealer days, she wrote an incredibly poignant column entitled, "On Mother's Day, See Your Mom for the First Time." And it reads like this: one morning he left for school, not knowing he was looking at his mother for the last time. My brother-in-law can still see her waving goodbye at the door in her nightgown 28 years later. He was only 13 years old. The gold bangle bracelets he bought her that last Mother's Day were still on her dresser when they rushed him home from school. His mom had been talking on the phone, and then her heart stopped. Atypical pneumonia, the death certificate read. She was 45. Of her 4 kids, 2 of them were barely teenagers, the other 2 barely adults. To say I never had a mother-in-law, she writes, would be wrong. I have her through her daughter, through her 3 sons, and through my husband, the oldest of them all. She taught them how to set a table where the forks went, how to fold a napkin. She taught them to never leave the house with dirty dishes in the sink. She taught them to love music. She took them to New York for Broadway shows and to the Blossom Music Center for rock concerts. They lost her young, So they treasure everything she left, every photo, every trinket. Every memory is a good one, even the bad ones. People without mothers feel like observers on Mother's Day. And so do children who longed for a mother's love they never felt. Everyone celebrates something we're all supposed to have, but some still don't have or never got. What if your mother didn't tuck you in every night? What if she was a lush? What if she criticized you daily? What if she longed for freedom from it all? Here's a question. What if none of that mattered anymore? My mom was so busy running a house with 11 children. I barely got to know her growing up. Fortunately, I still have the chance. Maybe you do too. So many women I know struggle to love their mom. Their mothers get under their skin. Mothers are part of our skin. You carry her DNA, her genes, her stories, even the ones that drive you mad. The older I get, the more I see her in the mirror looking back. I see her cheekbones, her smile, a map of her face winding into the wrinkled map of mine. I sing just like she always did, humming over the kitchen sink, which is her holy altar. My friend told me the other day, she writes, that she wished she could be friends with her mom. She wished she could start over, pretend that her mother was someone she'd never met, so that she could rediscover her. So maybe today, the best present we can give our mothers and everyone else in our life is to let them out of the box that we put them in. Free them from your memories of them. Find out who else they are. Instead of tuning out the stories you know by heart, ask new questions. Ask like you've never heard the stories before. Ask like you will never hear them again. Get to know the person they are, not just the person they were. Give them a new start. Go in with a blank slate, with no expectations. Go without your autobiography looming over theirs. My husband and his siblings don't go a day without missing their mom. When I asked my brother-in-law what he would ask his mom if he had the chance, he thought long and he thought hard. What would I ask her? He said. I'd ask her not to leave. How you see it will teach you how to solve it. Colossians 3 gives you the key to unlock that door. See things from Christ's perspective. Let go of the expectations. Treasure the moments. Savor the time. And speak the words. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.